and ball.
Absolutely.
I've been running, but I've been keeping up with it.
Well, that's good. Well, I hope things work out for you.
And it's new things. Everywhere coming at
Has Ford, has he been doing much work? I haven't seen any of these signs or anything.
We'll see next. Stolen.
Really? People stealing your signs? I heard Paul say something.
Yeah, he put one out in front of his place.
It's gone.
It's gone.
That's shit.
All right.
That is rotten.
Good deal.
Friend's house, boom, they're gone.
That's rotten.
So, I mean, it's a lot of left things. Right behind
Sure would.
Larry,
How you doing? Good. Good.
You ready to buy me lunch?
Yeah. I heard.
Okay, I'm showing it's 6:30. If I can get everybody to start to their seats. We'll do the rest later. Okay. City Council meeting for September 19th, 2011 will now come to order. Member times indicated next to agenda items or approximate start times only. Please turn off all cell phones for the duration of the meeting. Will the city clerk please call the roll? And lights are not blinking right now. Okay.
Are they flashing now?
They are flashing now.
Great. Mayor Natal.
Here?
Mayor Pro Tem Snyder.
Here.
Councilman Moreno.
Here.
Ms. Snyder. Is your light flashing? Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
That's okay. Councilman Benson.
Here.
Councilwoman Carson. Here. Councilwoman Teeter.
Here.
Councilman Diaz.
Here.
Councilman McEldowney.
Here.
Councilman Bullock. Mr. Mayor, you do have a quorum.
Thank you very much.
Would the audience please rise for a moment of silence and then join us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? As we do so, I'm sure that everyone is aware that we suffered a heartfelt loss in the loss of Bobby Krall today, and so I'd ask that during the moment of silence we would remember her and think of her and her wonderful contributions that she made to our community. She'll be missed. She was loved. Wanted to update everyone on the services. It's going to be a cremation, and that's going to be closed for just the family. However, on Sunday, October the 2nd at 1 o'clock at the Rec Center, there will be a tea / luncheon, light luncheon to honor Bobby. So everyone is invited again. It's Sunday, October the 2nd at 1 o'clock at the Rec Center. Thanks.
Could we get that put on the calendar? Would that be okay? Thank you, sir. Okay. The staff will pass around the microphone for introductions. Thank you.
Bob Zeiler. Steve Douglas.
Ellen Haug.
Rec Center.
Harvest Thomas.
Guillermo Serna. Gene Leffel, Board of Adjustment.
Joy Bishop.
John Howard, Information Technology.
Carolyn Keith, Parks and Recreation.
Michelle Rogers, City Manager's Office.
Robert Daves.
Rebecca White, CDOT Government Relations.
Kevin Radel, CDOT Program Engineer.
Brian Kelly-Okuski, CDOT Construction Engineer.
Michelle Halstead, Communications.
Jim Hayes, Community Development.
Pat Cronenberger, Dr. Cog.
Ron Ashe, United Power.
Rich Gonzalez, United Power.
Brittany Morris-Saunders, Director of Economic Development.
Bill Baca, Chief of Police.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Flannery, would you like to invite the representatives from United Power to come on up for their presentation? It's
Absolutely.
always nice to see you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'd like to ask Rich Gonzalez to come forward and introduce the other members of United Power.
There's a little red button. Terrific. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Natel, and council and staff. This evening, I'd like to introduce our CEO from United Power, Mr. Ron Ashe. We're here to make a little presentation and show our appreciation.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, and good evening, members of the City Council, and to Jerry Flannery and the members of the staff. Again, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I do have a presentation to make to you. United Power, as a cooperative, we are owned by our members, if you will, which includes the City of Commerce City. And as part of our operation, which differentiates us from an investor-owned utility, part of the net margins that we earn every year are returned back to our member owners, including the City of Commerce City. And so I'm here this evening to present to you on behalf of United Power with a check for your share of our patronage dividends for the year 2010, and would like to present that to you. This check is in the amount of $6,892.97, and again would like to thank Commerce City for your continued trust and support of United Power. We were very pleased that we just recently inked another new franchise agreement with the city for another extended period of time. I think it was 15 years or 20 years, and look forward to a continuing relationship for many years to come. And again, it's my pleasure to present to you, Mayor and members of the council, this check on behalf of United Power.
Thank you very much. They don't trust anybody on council with money. That's from the old days.
And it's always a privilege to be here with you. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we've also, some of us that live up on the north side, thank you for our personal checks.
Thank you.
I have a comment. Thank you for fixing that power line or whatever it was with the outages we had this summer. There were only 2, and you guys worked very hard to get that remedied. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Nice to see you, Rich.
You too.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Yeah. I was going to give him a minute just to get out. Okay, next item is citizen communication. There is a public comment roster available on the table at the entrance of council chambers for those who wish to address council. When I call your name, please state your name and address for the record. You're reminded each speaker is limited to 3 minutes. City council is reminded they are not to engage in discussion or debate, but may ask clarifying questions, express concern when appropriate. City manager will generally assign staff members to get the necessary information to solve issues. First person on the list is Stephen Douglas. Evening, sir.
Thank you. I'm Steve Douglas, 10970 Unity Parkway, Commerce City. I came here to express my sadness for Robbie Krall, and I appreciate Tracy saying that. Just wanted to say that I want to express my sympathy for Bobby's son, Jimmy Krall, and for the entire Krall family. It was only last week that Bobby celebrated her 87th birthday last week. So, I also had a question came up here about the King Soopers as far as the taxes. How is that structured? Is that part of Shea Homes Metro District, or is that part of the city as far as how the infrastructure is going to affect the taxes up north?
King Soopers, like any other business in the city, is subject to the Commerce City sales and use taxes. There is the incentive agreement that is an overlay, but the incentive agreement is like other incentive agreements that the city has approved, that's a rebate back, you might say, of a portion of any taxes paid, but initially the tax liability is there that King Soopers has the liability for.
Okay. Now, is that land designated in the Metro District as far as 2 through 5?
I am not sure about a Metro District for that. Do you know?
Yes, it is.
Is it 2?
To,
No, which Metro District that is?
I don't know which district it's
Okay.
in, no.
All right. I appreciate that. Thanks. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next person is Troy Bishop. Sir, I didn't see your name up here, but go ahead, Mr. Benson.
It's my understanding that the King Soopers is in the Reunion Metro Taxing District and the Northern Infrastructure GID. Is that not correct?
That would be correct, but I don't know which number of district it is.
Which number what?
The question was what number district, I don't know the number.
I don't know the number of the district. I don't.
There's 2 through 5 I just heard, so I don't know what number it's in,
Okay.
but it's in the Reunion Metro District, and it is in the GID.
Okay, that's what. Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Bishop, if you'd come forward now. Good evening.
My name is Joy Bishop. My address is 6491 Glencoe Street here in Commerce City. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm here this evening to invite everyone on the council, everyone here in the room, to the Historical Society picnic coming up this Saturday. It starts at 1 o'clock, and it's at the Veterans Park, which is the former Commerce City Park right there by the Rec Center on Forest Street. And we'll be eating at 1 o'clock. So I'd really like everyone to attend. I've gone to these picnics for the last couple of years, and I have so enjoyed hearing the stories from the individuals about the history of Commerce City and how things were done and how they changed and how everything happened. And it's really fun to just sit there and listen to each individual and the stories that they have to tell. So come and join us, 1 o'clock at Veterans Park, Saturday the 24th.
Thank you very much for the invite. Next person is Jane LaPelle. Evening, sir.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Gene Leffel, 6530 Brighton Boulevard, Commerce City, Colorado. And that's the Garden Terrace subdivision established in 1922. I'm here to invite everybody to something also. I would have invited you to the picnic, but Joy took care of that. I won't be there cooking the hamburgers this year, though, because I'll be working for Adams County at the Chemical Roundup. That's where you can get rid of all your old paint, motor oil, antifreeze, fertilizer, bug killer, tires, computers, batteries, fire extinguishers, propane tanks, and all that crap you got sitting around your place that you really haven't had time to quite throw away will be up at the Thornton IMC facility, which is at 2450 Washington Street. It's kind of on the east side of the road. They'll have a jillion signs up there. And from 9 till 3 o'clock, 2:59, we'll be collecting your stuff. And we'd like to see everybody bring up those types of items I mentioned, rather than just pitching them out in the alley or dumping them down the drain or doing other bad things with you. It's not quite as exciting as the historical picnic. I kind of rather would be there cooking those hamburgers. But this is an important thing for our environment and our community. So please, come join us at the chemical roundup before you go to the picnic. Thank you.
Okay. And the address again?
The address is 12450
Okay.
Washington Street. It's the Thornton Municipal Service Center type thing, their garages and whatsoever.
Okay.
And we usually have about a jillion signs out there along Washington to kind of direct you in there. And please don't come at 2:59.
Okay. I'm sorry? 9 to 3? Yeah, 2:59. Thank you very much, sir.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mr. Flannery, do you want to introduce the people from CDOT? Or do you just want to have them come up?
Just have them come up.
Please feel free to come on forward. Oh, only one of you gets to talk, huh?
I drew the short straw here.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Kevin Radel, 2000 South Holly, Denver, Colorado. That's where CDOT's located. Thanks for having me here tonight to talk about the projects that we got coming up on I-270 here in Adams County. And we're actually going to start the bridge rehab deck project here this Friday night. There's going to be approximately 6 weekend closures. It'll start late on Friday night and we'll open back up to traffic on Monday morning. There's 5 structures we're working on: the bridge over Dahlia, over the Burlington Ditch, over the Burlington Northern Railroad, and over the South Platte River, and the bridge over 265 are the 5 structures we're going to work on. The Dahlia Street Bridge will be done with single lane closures during the weekday nights, Tuesday through Thursday, and the other bridges will be worked on during our weekend closures. Hopefully Mother Nature cooperates with us. As you know, working in Colorado this time of the year, you're kind of rolling the dice, so we're hoping for the best there. With the 6 weekend closures, that would put us into October, first part of November, depending on the weather. We'll make the call, as we get there, depending on what the weather does and how far we get. So what we're going to do is basically go in, remove the existing asphalt on top, and then sound the deck, probably do hydro demolition, knock out the bad concrete in the deck, go back, patch that back, put a little deck on top of 1 to 2 inches of concrete, depending upon the existing deck depth that was there. And then we'll come back, put a waterproofing membrane on, and put asphalt on top of it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of what we're doing to all the structures out there. So that's kind of what we got going on in 270. We do have an overlay project coming up next summer. It'll take care of a stabilization problem. As you all know, there's a little whoop-de-doo out there. We'll try to fix that and do the overlay there. And with that, if you got any questions, I brought my project engineer along. I can always have him help me out with these.
Okay, and Mr. Flannery, if we could also get this information out on our website, because this might be a little important. Not that anybody's going to notice when it goes to one lane, because... Mr. Benson.
How many bridges are involved?
5.
And are those 5 of the 120 some odd bridges that have been listed as being unsafe?
No, they are not, and they're on a separate list at this point in time.
Wow, I thought we were going to be able to make some kind of a dent in that list, but...
That's our Bridge Enterprise program that we have going on at this point in time.
Okay, thank you.
You got off easy. That's it.
Thank
If you'll
you.
make sure that, well, I'm sure you will, between Michelle and our Ms. Halstead and Mr. Flannery, that they have all the information so we can get it on our website also.
Yes, and I believe our PR department's been in contact with Michelle
Yeah.
and you guys here. We've been talking about it, so I know I've talked to Darren about it a couple weeks ago
Great.
at a meeting, so.
We're so glad you're going to be out there. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you. Have a good evening. What? Yeah. I wanted to give him a minute. Okay. Next is approval of minutes, and there's actually 4 sets of minutes. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Snyder, did you? Oh, it's for the minutes? Okay. There are 4 sets of minutes before council this evening for approval. The first set of minutes are the minutes for the meeting of June 20th, 2011. Before voting on the minutes June 20th, I need a motion to allow Councilman Bullock and myself to abstain from voting because of our excused absence. I'd now entertain that motion. Ms. Snyder?
Yes, move to allow Mayor Natal and Councilman Benson, was it?
No.
Bullock.
Bullock.
Okay, sorry,
Get them
Councilman
mixed
Bullock.
up, I know.
To abstain from the minute voting of June 20th, 2011.
Okay, Mr. McEldowney?
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to allow Councilman Bullock and myself to abstain from voting on the minutes of June 20th. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 20th. Mr. Marino?
Move to approve the minutes of June 20th, 2011.
Okay, Ms. Teeter?
Second the motion?
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 20th, 2011. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, request a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Next set of minutes are the minutes of the meeting of June 27th, 2011. Before voting on these minutes, I need a motion to allow myself to abstain from voting because of an excused absence. Now entertain that motion. Ms. Snyder?
Move to allow Mayor Natal to abstain from the regular meeting minutes, June 27th, 2011.
Mr. McEldowney?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to allow me to abstain from voting on the minutes. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of June 27, 2011. Ms. Teeter?
Yes, move to approve the regular meeting minutes of June 27th, 2011.
Ms. Snyder? Second the motion. I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 27, 2011. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Next set of minutes are the minutes of the meeting of July 18th, 2011. Before voting on the minutes of July 18th, I need a motion to allow Councilman Marino to abstain from voting because of his excused absence. Ms. Snyder?
Move to allow Councilmember Moreno to abstain from the regular meeting minutes of July 18th, 2011.
Mr. McEldowney?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to allow Councilman Marino to abstain from voting on the minutes of July 18th. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 18th, 2011. Ms. Snyder?
Move to approve the regular meeting minutes, July 18th, 2011. Council is seated.
Mr. McEldowney?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 18th. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, request a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Last set of minutes are the minutes of the meeting of July 25th, 2011. Before voting on the minutes, I need a motion to allow myself to abstain from voting because of an excused absence. Mr. Marino, do you want to do that one?
Move to, sorry, the
Have me abstain.
Okay, move to allow Mayor Natal to abstain from voting on the minutes.
Ms. Teeter?
Second the motion?
I have a motion and a second to allow me to abstain from voting. Any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 25th. Mr. McEldowney.
So moved.
Ms. Teeter.
Second the motion?
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 25th, 2011. Any discussion? Seeing none, voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda. There are two items on the consent agenda this evening. Council is reminded these items can be removed from the consent agenda for discussion purposes at the request of a council member. Does anyone wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? Okay. If not, I'm open to a motion to approve the consent agenda. Ms. Snyder.
Yes, move to approve the consent agenda. Council is seated.
Ms. Teeter.
Second the motion?
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Will the city attorney please read the title?
Title of Resolution 2011-52 reads as follows. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Commerce City supporting the Denver Region's application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant Program. Title of Ordinance 1868 reads as follows. An ordinance amending the 2011 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the State of Colorado Department of Local Affairs Division of Emergency Management grant in the amount of $40,000 to offset operating costs within the emergency management budget and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. And that completes the consent agenda.
Okay. I had a motion and a second. City attorney's read the title. Comments? Mr. McEldowney, do you have a comment?
I was a little late on my button. I just wondered if we would be able to hear from our representative from Dr. Cog regarding the item.
I'm sorry?
If we would be able to hear from our representative from Dr. Cog, who's here tonight, regarding the item on the consent agenda.
Is that okay, Mr.?
Unless you remove it from the consent agenda, you can't discuss an item on the consent agenda.
Okay.
So do you want to move to reconsider?
I would ask to move to reconsider the inclusion of that item on the consent agenda.
Okay. Do I have a...
Second the motion?
I have a motion and a second to remove that particular item. Will we then
Voice vote.
just do the one then? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same? Okay. Mr. Gaylor, do we do the one item?
Yes, now you can approve the one item, and then the item that is to be removed is what, ordinance 1868? Is that the one? Or the other one?
2011-52.
Okay, so you can approve ordinance 1868 then. So you have a motion to approve ordinance 1868.
Okay. I'll need a motion to approve ordinance 1868 and consent agenda. Mr. McEldowney, did you want to do that one?
I'm fine with making that motion.
Sure.
So moved.
Okay. Mr. Marino? We're only doing the consent agenda on 1868.
Did Councilman McEldowney move?
I did.
Second.
Yes. Second. I have a motion and a second. I need a roll call vote on that particular one. Okay. Only on 1868, Ms. Power.
Yes, because you're...
The other one's been...
Agenda as amended, correct?
Yes, correct.
Then yes, and you're all set to
Okay.
go on that.
Okay, it's 9 yeses. The consent agenda on that one particular item is approved. Mr. McEldowney.
I just wanted to allow our representative from Dr. Cog, who is here this evening, to speak about the item before us. If we can invite her up, would be great. Or Mr.
Doesn't there
or
need
Mr.
to be a
Haynes.
motion on the floor to approve?
No, on the consent agenda, anyone can remove it. After you hear it and it's open for discussion, then you need a motion.
Would it be appropriate to have Mr. Flannery invite staff up to introduce the subject?
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Jim Hayes, the city's Community Development Director, has been working with Dr. Cog's staff on this grant application. So I'd like to invite him up to introduce the Dr. Cog staff person who's here this evening.
Okay. Good evening, sir.
Evening. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. Just to cover this item very briefly, the Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant is a program that Dr. Cog had applied for last year, and unfortunately they were unsuccessful in obtaining that grant. So they were looking for community support throughout the entire region, and we offered a similar resolution of support last year. So we're asking for the same kind of action here tonight. The grant itself is for $5 million, and it's to advance a variety of things for the community, including fine-tuning the Metro Vision Plan, integrating some federal livability principles, executing some of the plans in the Metro Vision document. And you might want to know why this may benefit Commerce City. One of the things that it does list in here is to possibly assist the North Area Transportation Alliance Transportation Management Organization, which is going to the Dr. Cog board on Wednesday night for approval. And I've got Pat Cronenberger here from Dr. Cog that can also answer some questions you may have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. Did you want to come forward, or at least to introduce yourself? We don't get to see you that often.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. It's wonderful being in your beautiful facility where I know so many of your staff members and so many of you. I really have nothing more to add to what Jim said, other than the fact that since this is a national grant that the region is pursuing, they do look to see that communities representing over 50% of the region's population support the grant. We're very excited about the prospects this year of getting the grant. Last year, the region came within a few percentage points of winning the grant. The region did not prevail last year, but it did give the region preferred status in any other kind of grant activities that we pursued. In fact, with some of the Tiger grants, the communities of Thornton and Denver have been able to benefit or have been able to list that preferred status on their applications for their grants. So it's a very significant thing. And last year we had the City of Commerce City support, and we're looking to have that support again this year as well. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Mr. McEldowney?
Thanks so much for being here tonight, Ms. Cronenberger. I think it's just a great example, and especially with your background on last year's near miss, just the regionalism that is so evident or so regularly demonstrated through the partnerships with Dr. Cog, and the fact that if we are to see this grant issued, that it's dollars that go straight to the region as a whole. And that's critical. The additional preference on the Tiger grants for getting some of those road projects underway at a time where those dollars are so scarce is a great added benefit. So our fingers are crossed, and again, thank you for all you do for us.
Mr. Marino?
Thanks for your explaining a little bit about the grant application. You mentioned that 50%. The communities represent 50% of the region is necessary or is encouraged to have on the application. How exactly is the region classified? Is it by Dr. Cog membership, or I was curious about that.
Primarily Dr. Cog membership, which is the 56 member governments, the 9 counties, and the 48 municipalities.
Great. And are a majority of communities signed on as of yet, or will more work still required on that front?
We've asked for everyone to send their resolutions by the 21st, and I think we have at least half by now.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Benson?
Yes, thanks for being here tonight, Pat, to present this personally to our council. Let's hope that we get this done this year. I think we're in a good position to get it accomplished this time. So, and is it time to move? Is there any further discussion? I would like to move for the adoption of 2011-52.
I would second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2011-52. Mr. Gaylor, do you need to read this one again?
I'll read the title. Resolution of the City Council of the City of Commerce City supporting the Denver Region's application to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Sustainable Communities Regional Planning Grant Program.
Okay, had a motion and a second. City Attorney's read the title. Do we need a roll call on this one also, sir?
Voice vote.
Voice vote. Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the same. Motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item is Ordinance 1870 on first reading tonight. It's an ordinance amending the 2011 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by recognition of the Department of Justice JAG and Byrne grant funds. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address council on this ordinance? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to introduce Ordinance 1870 by council as seated and approve the ordinance on first reading. Ms. Teeter.
Yes, move to approve ordinance 1870 on first reading.
Ms. Snyder.
Second the motion.
Had a motion and a second to approve Ordinance 1870. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, will the city attorney please read the title?
Title of Ordinance 1870 reads as follows: An ordinance amending the 2011 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Department of Justice JAG Byrne grant funds in the amount of $19,236 for equipment to be used by police department personnel and authorization of the expenditure thereof.
Okay, I've had a motion and a second. City attorney's read the title. Request a roll call vote, please. Vote is 9 yeses. Ordinance 1870 is passed on first reading. Thank you very much. Next item is discussion of citizen communication policy. I'll now ask City Attorney Gaylor to please begin the discussion regarding this policy.
You have in front of you a redraft that I have prepared for your consideration after my attempt to take into account the discussions that Council has previously had regarding this issue. The Council policy needs to be adopted by resolution, and that will be scheduled for an upcoming date for the City Council agenda based upon your discussion this evening. Now, you have in front of you the draft that is somewhat different from what you had in your packet. After discussion with the city manager, it was decided that it would certainly expedite the discussion this evening if you saw a draft from myself containing the changes from the policy that you've been operating under. In particular, I'm going to refer you to two specific provisions of the draft in front of you. Let me ask at this point, do all of you have the draft that I'm referring to in front of you? It's a red line version. It was sent to you earlier today, but with my concern that you may not have received it or had an opportunity to read it, I felt it desirable to hand it out to you this evening also so that you'd have it in front of you when I referred to specific provisions. First of all, I'd like to make this comment. Some of the items or issues that you discussed are somewhat nebulous or difficult to actually put into verbiage in a resolution. So some of this application of this resolution is going to take just some common sense, practical considerations down the road after you do adopt the policy. So it's difficult to cover every single situation that you might encounter in a citizen communication, but this draft attempts to address those concerns that you've expressed and that I felt should certainly be placed in the council policy in writing. But this evening is not for adoption, but for your discussion in order to assist myself and staff in order to come back to you with a final resolution for you to adopt this council policy. First of all, I'd like to refer to specific provisions that I feel are the real controversial ones. And if you refer to subparagraph D, that specific paragraph really is part of the heart of this council policy. And if you'll note, the specific verbiage commencing on the fourth line that says, individual council members will not engage in discussion or debate during citizen communications in council meetings, but questions may be asked of citizens during citizen communication to aid in clarification and determining a proper course of action. Expressions of concern are appropriate. So what this does is open up a dialogue that you may participate in, because I felt that from some of your earlier discussion that you wanted to have that kind of verbiage in here that you could engage in a question dialogue, not for the purpose of resolving the issue that evening, but at least knowing for sure what all the issues are, and then you ask the questions, and then based upon the answers to those questions, we as staff can go back and address the answers to those questions. So that's an important change here. The other change I want to point out is then appropriate follow-up. This is the last sentence of paragraph D. Appropriate follow-up will be provided by way of staff reports or agenda items. So based upon the discussion that flows from the citizen communication, the question you ask, the answer that's given by the person at the dais, then that tells the staff then what follow-up needs to occur, and then you will be advised at a future meeting or possibly at the same meeting if staff is available, but that's somewhat available to answer that question or able to answer that question, but that's somewhat difficult because that's inviting the possibility of a wrong answer when there's not an opportunity to research it and get the answer. But if city manager or myself know the answer and we're ready to provide the answer, it's certainly appropriate that we can provide the answer immediately, but that's with a word of caution. And then subparagraph F talks about the 3-minute limitation, but it also specifically states that the time spent in answering the questions and the questions that are asked are not to be timed as part of the 3 minutes. And we've been operating under that theory, but it hasn't been really expressed in writing, and this makes it clear for future council members to know exactly where you stand on that issue. Now, here's where the practicalities come into play and the common sense comes into play. If it appears that a particular item is taking an undue length of time to discuss, so the 3 minutes have been held and they've been exhausted and you're asking questions and there's further dialogue regarding it, then at some point the mayor or parliamentarian on behalf of the mayor, with council's concurrence, obviously, because you can overrule by a motion. If I, as parliamentarian, make a ruling and you don't like the ruling, you can make a motion to overrule my ruling. But if it looks like an issue is dragging on an undue length of time when you have people in the audience waiting to conduct council business, you certainly have the prerogative to cut it off and say, let's take this up as an agenda item at a future meeting. That's one obvious solution. Or just direct staff to come back with some answers at a future meeting, and then we would address it. But that's the exception rather than the rule. Hopefully, the citizen communication can be handled that evening with the citizen making the presentation and you getting the answer that you want, if it's an answer that can be given readily by myself or city manager or staff. Those are the two paragraphs, D and F, that I felt were somewhat controversial, and I wanted to bring those to your attention. The rest of the council policy as drafted is pretty much what you've been doing without too much of an exception there. It does provide specifically for clarification purposes in paragraph B that if you have a citizen in the audience and he wants to speak on something and he signs up for it or she signs up for it, we're going to allow him under this council policy to speak on the item, whether it's citizen communication or whether it's an agenda item. We had a little bit of a discrepancy in our practice when this situation occurs. We have a study session item on the agenda. And in the past, the general feeling has been citizens do not participate in study session items. But here you have a citizen signing up to speak, and they want to speak, but citizen communications, they can't speak because it's an agenda item, and then it gets to the agenda item, they can't speak because it's a study session item. Well, that's a little inconsistent, and we haven't, if you recall, there was an incident where that occurred, and we allowed the citizen to speak at the study session, even though it was not generally a practice to do that, but it would have been very awkward to, on the one hand, say they couldn't speak on citizen communication. Now it comes to study session, we say they can't speak there either. I mean, that's not the result you want. So we allow them to speak, but this clarifies it that on any agenda item, they can be heard, even on a study session item, and then you, and here's where the common sense practical solution comes into play, if it gets to be at a point where there's an extended discussion on a study session item that you don't feel is being productive, you can certainly limit the discussion further, and because it is a study session item, not an action item, to save it for when the item comes up for action. But that's my suggestion as to how to address it. Let everybody sign up that wants to on any agenda item, whether it's study session or not, and then you can use your judgment as to how far you want it to go at a study session. That's the way this is, or in a study session item. That's the way this is worded. Now, if you don't care for that, then you need to address it this evening. That's in paragraph B. And those basically are the items that I thought needed to be specifically addressed for your consideration. So I'm open for questions and open for discussion.
Ms. Carson.
Mr. Gaylor, thank you. I fully understand your explanation of the study session, because I think the way we handle business is very confusing to the public. I don't know if there's a right way to do it. Can you explain the reasoning when other municipalities hold study session that they do not allow citizen input during study session?
I can, really based upon the history in Commerce City and how that policy, unwritten policy as it was, came into effect in Commerce City. The goal of a study session is for City Council to consider an item, to get input from each other, and then to go forward. And when you open it up for citizen input, there is the danger, if it's not properly controlled, to monopolize that study item for the time of the whole meeting. Because you got a study session item, and undoubtedly you'll have other study session items on there. And if you spend too much time on one item, your meeting is going to go so long, and then you're not really equipped to handle the full discussion among you that you want. But on the other hand, that's where I've indicated that the practical common sense applies here, that if it gets to be too much citizen communication or citizen input, I should say, into the study session item that doesn't give you an opportunity to fully discuss the item, then it's going to defeat your purpose of a study session item. But having said that, I still feel that from an open meeting, citizen input point of view, you're probably ahead, rather than trying to limit their input to at least hear what they have to say, because within limits it might be helpful to you in making your decision.
Well, the explanation is what I had thought it was. And I can't say that I fully agree with you that I believe they should come in front of us and speak on a study session item. I think we confuse them because I think citizens look online or wherever to find an agenda. They see what's on the agenda. Is there any way, when we do that agenda, where it says study session, if we could always put citizens are not allowed to speak on study session items? And
we can certainly do
clarify
that.
it?
We could certainly do that, and then your answer would be is that when it comes up for an action item, at that time, they'd be allowed to speak on that
Because
item.
I think when this council approved to make an exception, it was because we felt bad somebody had come to the meeting, had gone
Right.
out of their way, but they had totally misunderstood that was a study session item and they weren't allowed to speak on it. And so I don't believe we were saying we wanted them to always come in front of us for study session. If we could clarify it on that agenda, so when they're reading that agenda and they read study session, no citizen communication allowed.
That would certainly be appropriate, and that's why we're having this
Okay.
discussion this evening, and it does serve to shorten the meeting. Then the other question would be, is they signed up to speak for citizen communication on the 3-minute rule, would you allow them to speak that night, or would you say, wait, it's a study session item, wait until it's an agenda item, and then you speak, and you don't even allow them to speak at citizen communication?
If there's any way we can get information out to the public that items that are scheduled for study session are not really for citizen communication, and I think we could solve a lot of problems. We may still have some citizens who come forward not fully understanding that completely, and I don't know, maybe then this council would want to make an exception at the time, but study session items, I believe, are study session items, and I would like to see them stay that way.
One thing, Mr. Mayor and Council, it's a challenging topic from the sense that I believe there used to be a clear line between study session and council meeting. Right now, we pretty much have a council meeting every Monday night. So there used to be citizens communication and, I believe, introduction of audience at only the council meetings, and the policy changed to allow it to go to both study session and council meeting, which I think is fine. I think what happened then is that you did have citizen communication coming forward wanting to speak on agenda items on a study session. So, knowing this group and I think knowing how most jurisdictions do it, if there's a study session and there's a public opportunity to speak, it would usually be under the 3-minute citizens communication. Unless you wanted to change it in a rare instance to let them speak on an agenda item that was a study session item. But I think if a citizen comes and submits a request to speak, that they should be given that 3 minutes under citizens communication, even if the item is on the agenda. At least you'll have that information when you do have your discussion. Study sessions are supposed to be casual, more informal, but we have every one of our meetings like this. We've tried to sit everybody down here, and there's been challenges with that, and so I think that's part of the complication is just in general the setting of how we work it.
I fully agree. And then the next item that and I'm sure a lot of people up here will want to hang me for this, I would like to increase the 3 minutes to 5. I do believe that since I've sat up here, and it hasn't been every single time, but there's been enough occasions that I feel that that 3-minute buzzer went off before somebody was done speaking. And I'm not trying to increase the time that we set up here or this or that, but I think anything you have to say can be said in 5 minutes. I think the 3 is sometimes a little difficult, and I almost feel rude in the middle of somebody's conversation and that buzzer goes off and you derail them. 2 more minutes to add, and I would ask the citizens, please use the 2 minutes only if needed, if you can say what you need to say. It's not a rule that you have to come up and use every minute that is allotted to you. But I hate that buzzer going off in the middle of somebody's conversation. I'm done.
Okay. Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you. I recall several years ago discussing paragraph K, and to me there's going to be a difference in whether an item, whether they're speaking about a potential legislative item or a potential quasi-judicial item. And we've said in paragraph K that if there's a reasonable probability that this matter is going to become a quasi-judicial matter, that we're going to have to cut them off and say, you've got to come back for the public hearing. But if it's a legislative matter, I guess I think that's the distinction that needs to be made there. Do you agree with that, Mr. Gaylor? I mean, maybe we've already covered that under item K and D.
The operative word here is quasi-judicial, so if it's quasi-judicial as opposed to legislative, that's important. Now, I fully agree. If it's a legislative matter, then certainly any input that you get from your constituents to help you to make that decision on a legislative matter, that's certainly appropriate. Now, if you'd feel more comfortable in K, I could say quasi-judicial as opposed to legislative, just to make it more clear. But when I say they're quasi-judicial, that does not include legislative. So it's up to the council. If you feel that you'd like some clarification that it doesn't mean legislative, that's an easy fix. I can say quasi-judicial as opposed to legislative.
And I guess item K specifically refers to quasi-judicial.
It does, right.
Okay, and not legislative. So I think that's with a reasonable probability. If there's a reasonable probability that it's going to come up, then that party's going to have to be advised you've got to come back during the hearing.
Right.
Okay. And can I ask, you've been around here for a long time, and I remember going to council meetings back in 05 and 06 and halfway through 07 when we had a different policy about what can be covered on citizen communication. And it seemed like that policy was working very well. I don't know. And I'm just wondering, how do you think that this policy differs from the policy that was in effect back then? Because we had a lot of controversial issues, I know, that were covered during citizen communication back then, and it didn't create a problem. Everybody just had something to say, and then we were done. But how do you think, does this differ, or is it about the same as what we had prior to about May or June of 07 when we started cutting people off?
It borders on a similar approach. Of course, a lot varies with the council members, and a lot varies with the citizens involved and the issues involved. But by and large, the council, through the years, if they had a controversial issue, definitely did not try to solve it during the council meeting. They'd refer it at the outset to staff to bring back a report with a direction. We want to report at, and then you give them a set time. Now, we've been doing that by and large, but we have somewhat gotten away from that rule because there have been occasions where at the dais, in an effort to satisfy the citizen more than anything, you've attempted to solve the issue right then and there. And there has been a time or two where the information that was forthcoming then from staff was not totally complete because we did not have the opportunity to research it fully like we should have. But city manager and I have discussed this, and we've agreed with each other. Certainly, if council asks us a question that we're not 100% sure of the answer, we're going to tell the council we need time to research that. But I think the approach that is drafted here pretty much answers the concerns that I had, at least, with regard to the dialogue that takes place, always bearing in mind that you as a council, if you feel that it's getting out of hand, can cut it off, or I, as a parliamentarian, could attempt to cut it off, subject to your being able to overrule me, and the mayor, the same position, because when I speak as parliamentarian, I'm really speaking on behalf of the mayor as the chair of the meeting. So I think in general, D pretty much attempts to solve the issues that have been raised specifically by certain members of the council.
Sure.
And I had that in mind when I drafted this. Now, I didn't address the 5 minutes as opposed to the 3 minute, but that's really up to the council how you want to do that. And then, of course, paragraph B, there have been some good points made, and you're going to have to tell us how you want to go with this agenda item, study session versus citizen communication and so forth.
Well, you know, in paragraph D, it's about the fourth line down, where you say individual council members will not engage in discussion or debate during citizen communication. I would leave out will not engage in discussion, because if we're allowed to ask questions and we're getting an answer, that's a discussion. I would say that will not engage in debate, but when we say will not engage in discussion, that would be inconsistent with our ability to ask questions and get an answer, which to me is a discussion.
I see your point. What I was really saying there, and maybe I didn't say it as well as I should have, is that will not engage in discussion. I was talking about expressing an opinion about this should be done or that should be done. I wasn't ruling out, because the next sentence there talks about certainly being able to ask questions and getting the information, but again, trying to discourage you from up there saying what you feel is the solution, because bear in mind, you're one of 9, and we don't want to give the impression to the individual at the podium here in the public that this is the answer. And that's what I was trying to avoid, having given that impression. So, but again, that's why we're having this meeting tonight, so I get input from you as to how you want this to read.
I would leave out discussion off of that line, and but you know, that's all I had at this time.
Speak on that. Mr. Benson, the way I was reading that is I would leave it in there because as a citizen, if I came in front of this council and I might think then that I had the ability to ask and bring Ms. Teeter into a discussion and say it's your responsibility, when it's stated in this way, I don't believe that I would feel that I had that right to do that, but that you very much, as a council representative, could ask questions of me and get more information. But so that's the reason I would leave that in there.
Okay, we'll get back to that. Mr. McEldowney, you were next.
I think Ms. Carson raises a good point on a couple points there. You know, this is really all about trying to strike a balance between what we all want and crave, which is input from our community. It's something that we commonly say we don't get enough of. And yet here we are talking about how do we curtail it? Well, it's about how do you curtail it at the top of a meeting when you've got a finite amount of time and potentially a lot to talk about. So the thing I really think Ms. Carson has zeroed in on tonight that I think is critical in whatever we put forth is how do we make a very plain set of points visible to the community for folks who are not tuned into council on a regular basis, who might encounter something that becomes their hot issue and they want to come before us. They don't have any past experience in dealing with a council. What do they need to know in 3 to 5 bullets that tell them about how to deal with, how to bring something forward, right? This is the time that you have. This is the limitations around that discussion. This is not that we don't want to hear from you, but I guess to me it's about clearly defining what the purpose of that 3 minutes is for, so that people understand it's a time to raise the awareness of council to an issue that they may not be aware of otherwise. And the other key point there is it's not the time to solve the issue. And it's not that we don't want to solve it. I think we're all problem solvers. And so the danger is that we'll get sucked into doing that. And that was actually the reason, I know Mr. Benson cited the change in policy after he and I came on. Part of that was because we were seeing more and more often council members tempted to get sucked into that problem solving. And we are up here because we've got a desire to serve and a desire to fix and a desire to make things better. And it's all too easy to get sucked into trying to do that live. But it's unfair to the citizen and it's unfair to our peers to try and jump into that. And it's certainly unfair, as we know, to staff who may not have the information on hand to present the full background. So I guess my general comments really speak to how do we make it clear? And I like the idea of clarifying within the agenda so that if somebody sees the printed agenda at the back of the room, they see the printed agenda online, that we're very, very clear about what is and is not up for comment on a given night. I think the comments about moving from 3 to 5 minutes, in all of the municipalities that I could sort of spot check when I looked across their policies and you look online at their agendas, 3 minutes is pretty much a standard. But what I did find interesting is that there are a number of communities that, in an effort to try and create more mechanisms for feedback, have actually added at the end of a meeting, at some interval, whether it's once a month or twice a month, like a pseudo town hall, which is more of a looser, open chance for somebody to come up and bring something up before council. It puts it at the end of a meeting so that you're not getting in front of people that might be here as guests or otherwise. It's not something I think that we want to solve for tonight, but I think my comment more than anything says, how do we differentiate citizen communication at the top of a meeting, budget a reasonable amount of time, clearly sort of outline those rules, and then how do we introduce other tools, other ways for our citizens to get information to us? Because we need as much of that input as we can, and it's not fair for them or us if we start getting into each other's throats because we're frustrated that we don't maybe have the background that somebody else up here does. Because I know that also sometimes happens, is one of us has background and we want to jump in, but then it's a disservice to really the citizen and to the others on council and staff. So, I don't know, more comments than anything. Thoughts?
Okay. Mr. Bullock?
A thought I had on paragraph D, if it's that council members shall not engage in debate with other council members during citizens' communication, because that used to be a walking quicksand in previous times where all of a sudden the person out there at the podium is standing there watching us argue among ourselves on something that all of a sudden it loses all its value to them. So, Mr. Gaylor, if it would be possible, could you add that sentence in there? Appropriately, I probably didn't state it right, but I would like to see where we as a council aren't up here trying to debate and solve the problems. And throughout this whole document, I want it to be clear that we will still refer to the city manager and city attorney issues that come before us, but we're basically reformatting this to be able to have a discussion with citizens in citizens communication. And does that make sense? Oh, okay.
And we'll get to all of these items as we get through. Right now, they're all suggestions and part of our discussion. I have a couple of things. I have a concern with the having citizens speak for 3 minutes prior to study session on something that we will be dealing with at study session. Not that I don't feel that their input is important, but that gives them the first chance and the first input. They could, I'm not saying they would, but they could give us information that does not follow what we will be hearing from staff sometime later. That's a kind of a concern for me, especially when sometimes when we get into these topics in study session, there isn't any information or any request for action at that point. It's strictly study session. That's a concern. My other concern that, I know Mr. Bullock did a wonderful job of putting to words what I couldn't quite come up with. We have had a challenge in the past where somebody's here and somebody on council will say, okay, we're going to take care of that, and then somebody else on council says, well, no, we're not, and we wind up fighting among ourselves. The other thing that I think needs to be in here is when questions are directed to staff, that they be directed to the city manager or the city attorney. There's nothing worse than for us to call one of the department directors on the carpet and say, what are you doing about this? And they've never even heard what's coming up, and we're expecting them to come up with an answer. If we direct any of our questions to the city manager or the city attorney, they then could look back and say, Ms. Halstead, do you have any information at this time, or do you need time? So that we are not doing, I think it had, I'm trying to think of what it used, what was it? Stump the Chump is what it used to be called prior to me coming on as mayor. We don't need to do that. You know, I think there needs to be something in there. And again, this is just one more suggestion, and we're going to get to whether we're going to accept these suggestions or not. But we need to get to that point where all the questions go through either the city attorney or the city manager. Mr. Flannery, were you going to say something?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, members of council, if you look at this entire topic as, in its simplest terms, citizen communication is an opportunity for a citizen to be allotted a certain amount of time on a regular agenda. And in our case, we actually allow that on study sessions as well. So they can come forward and communicate something to you, an opinion, an event that's occurring sometime in the future, one that's occurred in the past, a position on a certain item where there may be strong emotions, numerous things. And many of those things could come before you in an agenda. Some might actually be scheduled in the future. I think one of the rule of thumbs that you as a group should measure yourselves on is if it starts feeling like an agenda item, then maybe it is an agenda item, and maybe that's when, you know, the referral should occur to staff, because I think when you have a lot of discussion going on, prolonged discussion, that's when it becomes more of a disservice to those people in the audience who've probably gone through some process in months and probably spent, you know, a lot of money on engineers to get to this point. And really, you don't want an agenda hijacked for 20 minutes of discussion on citizens communication. And that did occur 4 years ago or so. I know that there were a number of meetings that we didn't get to the agenda actually for 2 hours, where we had, an incredible amount of audience members waiting for the business of the city. So I think that's somewhat of where it came from. But I think if you feel like something, I think tonight was a really good example of how it does work. Councilman Benson asked a couple of clarifying questions. Answers were given. It was fine. I think when it gets into a lot of discussion and a lot of debate, you have to be careful as a legislative body, because you are the highest body in the city, to not get in a position where you're legally cornered on something where you've given an opinion as a body, and that may be coming before you in some other future meeting, or it may be heading to court somewhere, and you're not aware of that because you're not informed on it. So those are the things that you should be careful of. I think this works real well. I think it's up to you on how you want to handle the citizen communication, how many minutes, and whether or not you want to allow them to speak in study sessions or not, and whatever else you might have tonight. But I thought I'd just say a few words.
Okay. Mr. Moreno?
I think the revisions suggested are mostly good. There's a couple of concerns that I have. In Section F, when it says, except when speaking on an item that is on the agenda, each speaker shall be limited to 3 minutes. My concern there is then that if an item is on the agenda, that there is no specific time limit for the citizen communication. And then, as mentioned before, it can go on and on and on. That's a concern that I have on that section. And then in Section H, where it says personal attacks, whether directed towards members of the City Council, city staff, or fellow citizens, are prohibited. I would prefer to see it read, personal attacks, whether directed toward members of the City Council, city staff, fellow citizens, or the speaker, are prohibited. I have not seen this since I've been on council, but I have had citizens say that they've come to a council meeting in the past and have felt personally attacked by a council member, whether it be that the council member was asking, or that the council member either wasn't receptive to what they were talking about, or maybe made a flippant comment or something like that. But I would just like to see that piece added to assuage some of the concerns that some citizens have brought up to me, that they felt a bit personal attacked when they did bring their concerns forth.
Mr. Bullock?
This is just a little bit of history about study sessions. In the old days, we used to have the study sessions on the third floor of the old building, and we sat around a round table, and everybody sat around us, in front of us, behind us, and everything. And the reason why study sessions have always been a part of the meeting where we had no citizens communication, because we let them happen one time, and it became, we had words going around the back of front of us, we had words everywhere. So I totally agree that on the agenda where it says study session, no comment during the study session, because a study session can be hijacked, and I don't know who said it, but they're absolutely right. There might be coming items on this study session we know nothing about. Now, most items that come on the agenda, we have a little bit of knowledge before they arrive, but a study session, and I don't mind if somebody catches me outside and gives me their opinion on it, but as the meeting is in session, I would like it show that we aren't going to have comments during the study session or on items that are study session items, because it is something that may never, ever come up. It might get dropped in study session, and just the citizens' communication can create hard feelings there. So if it moves forward to a ordinance or resolution, they will always be able to speak on it. If they want to speak to a council member after the meeting or before the meeting on it, they can do that, but I would love to have that on the agenda where it shows that those items are, but that's just my opinion. I don't know how the rest of the council feels about that.
Okay. Mr. Benson?
You know, I hate to keep bringing up the word quasi-judicial, but it seems to me that that's the key here. If it's legislative, we can hear, anybody's entitled to get up and use their 3 minutes to talk about anything, any matter of business that's the business of the city. And if it's something that is on the agenda for a vote that night, then I guess they'd have to be told, you're going to have to do this during that time. But at any other time, if it's a legislative matter, whether it's the first, whether we hear from a citizen before we get the input from the staff, I mean, I certainly have the cognitive ability to separate those two things. If it's quasi-judicial, it's a completely different thing. Because if it has a reasonable probability of becoming quasi-judicial, we're not supposed to hear anything about it until we get to the public hearing. And I don't know, once you separate those two things out, that's the first inquiry. Is it legislative or quasi-judicial? If it's legislative, we can hear about it from any source at any time. But it seems like it's a simple solution.
Did you want to talk? Okay. Ms. Teeter?
Mr. Bullock, I agree with you on the study sessions about not any input from the citizens during that session or before. Secondly, I was at some of those meetings that did not start until 2 hours later, and that's why this policy was put in place. I know we're all smiling now because it's not 1 in the morning, but I always have had difficulty when we would have a citizen come up, since this was put in place, and they really had a problem, and they were very passionate about it and very seriously about it. And after they were finished, I only could look at them. And I think that needs to change. I would like to engage in some conversation and show that I'm passionate about trying to remedy their problem as well. But we need to really factor in time in this. I feel changes need to take place, and like you said, Mr. Gaylor, if it gets going too long, then it's up to the mayor to jump in and say, okay, we will discuss it at a study session or turn this over to staff. But I've also seen times, Mr. Mayor, when you've tried to do that, and then you have people up your throat. So this is going to have to go under the part that no arguing between council members. The next mayor, this mayor, whatever, when he puts a stop to it, the rest of the council needs to respect that.
Mr. McEldowney?
I think Ms. Teeter raises a good point tied to my comment. It's a slippery slope. I mean, depending on the topic that comes up in citizen communication, everybody wants to show that they have a heart and weigh in on it. And what happens when you've got 9 people who want to make sure that everybody knows that they feel bad or that they're concerned? I think the one theme that I see in policies that I've looked at is that there is I don't know if I want to call it a clinical detachment or what the right term is, but it's limited. It's boxed in. It's not a time for extended dialogue. It's a time to raise an item to the attention of the council. It's fairly straightforward. There's nothing that says that offline somebody can't submit a more extended concern or position or otherwise. In fact, there are policies out there that clearly state you're going to get 2 minutes or 3 minutes to raise your point. If there is more information that you want to convey, then you can do so. Here's the formal process to get that submitted to council. If you can submit it such and such an amount of time ahead of time, then staff will make sure that it's in the hands of council in advance of the meeting so they have that ahead of you. I think, as Ms. Teeter pointed out, it's easy for us to sit here tonight when we're all very calm and say, here's the policy. And then here comes that hot topic one night that gets everybody's blood boiling, and because we have that latitude in our policy, all of a sudden we're all now engaging, and it's difficult to reel anybody back in. And you risk crossing that threshold, and we lose our professionalism, and the discussion goes awry, and the citizen is now not getting any resolution. They're just getting a bunch of other people fired up. So how do we strike a balance? I mean, what lessons can we take from other communities on how they've put policies in place that try and strike that balance? And I don't know that I have the answer as much as I'm trying to figure out how do we accommodate and sort of meet those different needs?
Good. Mr. Bullock?
Speaking to that, you're absolutely right. When we have numerous citizens speaking on the same issue, we always, and I can't say always, most of the time we've said, pick a spokesperson and let them be the spokesperson for this group and then a spokesperson for the other group. As council people, I understand completely what Ms. Teeter says in the item of showing compassion. We all want people to know that we are compassionate about any issue they bring before us. But we don't all need to do an Academy Award performance for them. So when we think about this, like our role as leaders are thinkers, planners, facilitators, and futurists. And so we have to learn to work on the issues and don't get involved in them to the point where we're sucked in, and learn to work with what it is and not how to solve it. So I think if, as council people, if we just remember don't get in and don't get how, we will be far ahead of the game because we will be doing the same thing we ask the citizens to do. Don't take up a lot of time just to talk.
Okay. Mr. Gaylor, I think what we need to do now is just go down through the list of things, topics that people have brought up that change what you have here. And I'm going to assume that you've been writing them down. We'll take each one and then get an idea from the council whether that's something we want to do or not do.
Okay, and I did make notes as you were speaking. So
Okay.
the first one on my list is in paragraph B, which deals with the issue raised by Councilwoman Carson, which, and I'll wordsmith this at the appropriate time, but in general, agendas shall clearly state that citizens may not be heard on study session items, but shall wait to speak when the item is placed. Wait to speak when an item is placed on the agenda as an action item.
Okay.
That's the first item that I've got, this
Now-
question of speaking on study session items.
Okay. Does anyone on council have a challenge with us putting that in there? Mr. Benson?
I'm not sure that I understand this. I think that if we're going to have citizen communication before we have a study session, which of course is just we call these special meetings these days so we can have a vote on an item if we want to. And there's an item there for a study session where a presentation is going to be made by the staff. Are we saying that we're not going to allow citizens, even though it's a potential legislative item, that we're not going to let them talk about it? Is that what we're...
No, that's the next point I have.
Okay.
The first item is whether or not you're going to allow them to speak on the study session item.
Okay.
Then the next one I'm going to ask you is, if this is approved, are you going to then allow them to speak as a citizen's communication item, since they can't speak on the study session item? Or are you going to make them wait until it's an action item before they speak at all on that item? That's really, maybe the two kind of go hand in hand. It depends on how you want to handle this, Mr. Mayor. But that's the question. You got study session item, then you got citizen communication item if they can't speak at the study session.
Well, there again, doesn't it, the driving factor there is quasi-judicial versus legislative, isn't it?
No.
No,
Doesn't have anything to do with that.
because we've got that addressed on
Mr.
quasi-judicial. That comes
Gaylor,
later.
let's-
None of this is
Yeah.
quasi-judicial.
We're just talking about
Let's
legislative.
just, I think what we need to do is we need to go down the row because we can make this go on forever. And I know Mr. Bullock's okay, and I know we can start with him. But right now, what I think is in front of us, which is what you said, is that if it's on the agenda, then you can't speak at citizen communication. If it's on the study session, we don't take input into the study session. Mr. Bullock. I'm just going to go down the row. It's going to be easier than trying to answer all these.
If it's on the study session, there will be an item that says they are not allowed to comment, and that means in citizens' communication or during study session, because 9% of the time, study sessions are staff reports on an issue they're bringing to us. It doesn't have nothing to do with legislative or quasi-judicial. It's a study session item, and we do not, or I'm saying we should not allow comments during study sessions. And so I say no.
Okay. Mr. McEldowney.
Ditto.
Agree with
Ms.
that.
Diaz.
I agree with that as well.
Ms. Teeter.
Same.
Ms. Snyder.
Agreed.
Ms. Carson. Mr. Benson.
I agree with the conclusion reached by Mr. Bullock, not necessarily how he got there.
Mr. Marino.
I would just make sure that we advertise to get citizens in the practice of doing that, but yes, I agree.
Good. That one's done. On to the next one, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Bullock.
All right, the next one I have is on this issue about, it's in paragraph D, individual council members shall not engage in, there was a request to delete the word discussion, and the question is whether or not you want to leave it as written or you want to delete discussion.
Mr. Bullock, I'm going to try to work with what I think you heard. It probably needs to be a different word or a different way. What it needs to say is not that you won't be communicating with the citizen, but that you will not try to give some solution to the citizen that some other council member is going to either agree with or disagree with, which then becomes a large challenge. Mr. McEldowney, you have a better way to put it?
Maybe. I think the point is you were going towards trying to not solve for something during that discussion. See if I can come up with the words I just had. I think it's something along the lines of, unless an answer is immediately available from staff, council shall not attempt to solve the matter during the course of communication. We can find a different way to wordsmith it, but I think the key is raise the item. If there's an available, guaranteed answer, let's give it so that somebody can leave with an answer. Otherwise, the key is we need to, acknowledge that we've heard it and determine what the course of action will be. Does that make sense?
Mr. Gaylor, does that give you the idea? And then I'm going to go down. Hopefully you're getting the idea, and I'm going to start going down the list again.
Right.
Just to see if that, Mr. Bullock, are you okay? Are you okay with how he's?
All I'm making sure, this is a discussion, a debate between the council and the person at the podium, not the council and the council.
It'll be included in.
Okay, because I don't want to have that, I want it to be wordsmithed in where we don't get into those either.
Yes.
And we don't try to solve it among ourselves up here where
I think that's the spirit of what I was trying to get to, which is if we've got clarity in how that interaction is supposed to work, it should temper or limit our temptation to maybe try and dive in that, right?
So Mr. Bullock and Mr. McEldowney, does that kind of work between the two of you? Mr. Diaz? Yep. Ms. Teeter?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder? Ms. Carson? Mr. Benson?
I'm not sure I understand the issue. Are we talking about what are we going to substitute for this language?
That's what Mr. Gaylor is working on now.
Should
we
I
don't know
read
the
it?
exact words, but we have the idea.
Okay.
Well, I agree with that.
Generally, the idea.
Okay.
Do you want me to recite?
Mr. Marino?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Gaylor, you want to
Okay, generally what I got out of that discussion was that unless an answer is immediately or readily available by staff, individual council members will not attempt to reach a solution during citizen communication or engage in debate with citizens or other council members during citizen communications.
Does that work, Mr. McEldowney, Mr. Bullock? Does it work with council? Thank you.
Does
On
it
to the
leave
next
in-
item, sir.
Does it leave in the language, but questions may be asked of citizens during citizen communication to aid in clarification and determining the
Right.
proper
It
course?
leaves, I didn't change that,
No,
because
that
that's
was
the
not
next
part of
sentence.
this discussion.
And
That-
expressions of concern are appropriate, that's written in here, too.
That's still in there. That's still
Right.
in there.
Right.
Okay,
Mr.
I'm good.
Gaylor, next item.
Next item is in paragraph F. There was discussion dealing with the period of time shall be limited to 3 minutes, or there was mention of 5 minutes.
Okay. Do you want to start at Mr. Bullock?
I am okay with 5 minutes if it is a few people. If we have extended citizens' communication, I would like to leave it at 3 minutes, and in Denver, they only give you 2. We aren't Denver, but I would like to leave it at 3 if it's an extended group that wants to communicate, but it's okay to go to 5 if it's like it was tonight. We had 3 people that came up, and instead of them having to hurry and get the addresses, okay, so that's my
Is there a
comment.
number that we could use? Like when you say extended, is that 10?
Say a number.
Extended, let's say 7 or more. Anything over 7 goes to 3 minutes.
Mr. McEldowney, I know you have a suggestion.
I mean, we could over-engineer this thing to death, and I think
Yes.
that's my concern is, well, on Tuesdays, in odd months, it's this, and, I mean, let's pick a time. Let's set a limit on the duration, potentially, of the citizen communication agenda item. Maybe that's another mechanism I've seen used elsewhere, where there is an allocated amount of time for citizen communication. If that time expires, it expires. I guess my thought is 3 minutes is a good window. I think about the first times I came before council as a citizen and talked. That 3-minute limit caused me to really reflect on what I wanted to say, how I wanted to say it, and forced me to get my point across in that amount of time. So you open it up and you get into the position that sometimes we find ourselves in, which is talking around and around and around it. So 3 minutes.
Okay.
Going back to what you just said.
Yes.
We get a lot of high school and junior high kids in here that can't formulate their words into concise 3 minutes like Jason can. So I want to be sympathetic to the fact that we have some that they say or 27 times. So let's be conscious of everybody that's going to speak for us, because we've had a lot of kids coming in and ask for donations, and we don't know what they're talking about until almost when the 3 minutes are over.
Okay. I have a suggestion that I watched happen at the Adams County Commissioners meeting. They're on a 3 minutes also, which to me is a wonderful time to keep people on track. But they actually had a speaker who came up and said, you know what, I need 5 minutes, and here's why. Council, now there's only 3 of them, but the council said, what do you think? They said, okay, fine, but stay on track. And they gave that one person a little extra time. But it was a request to go over the 3 minutes. Rather than just saying, let's just give everybody 5 because we will have some who will need it. Would that be a better way to do it?
Some people will be able to ask for it.
Oh, but that would be our part. That would be our part to say ahead of time, you know when somebody's going to come up, when there's going to be a challenge. You know, I know the same thing about high school kids and even some of the citizens where it's a big deal, where they might need a little more time. But maybe to handle it that way rather than to give everybody 5 minutes and have them stretch out. Because when you think about it, now I can only go back 7 years, but a lot of times we can tell when that's going to happen. And people stay. There are very few who go over. So would that work? I'm trying to keep it moving. My fear is
Go on down the line
Okay.
and see what they think.
Mr. McEldown.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think to that point, when we've had kids with specific topics, we've often just kind of thrown the rule out the window as a sort of unwritten rule, whether it's the kids talking about smoking or fundraising. I mean, those are things that tend to get a lot of latitude, and I don't think there's an issue with that. I think the key is to have a fairly rigorous process that helps guide the activity on a regular basis, and then you deal with that exception.
Good. So are you looking at 3 minutes with exceptions? Mr. Diaz?
I agree with that. I personally think that 3 minutes is adequate. I do feel like that us being allowed to ask the citizens questions now, moving forward, allows us to really focus in on getting them to get to the point.
Okay. Ms. Teeter?
3 minutes, and I agree with you, too. It opens up the conversation now that we're able to talk to them about it. So 3 minutes.
Okay. Ms. Snyder?
I'm okay with the 3 minutes, but I would like to say that if there was a request for the 5 minutes that we, I'm sorry, Guillermo, I say I would be fine with the 3 minutes, but I do think that the 5 minutes is a good idea if somebody would need it or wanted to request it. So I just, sometimes people are in the middle of explaining where they're coming from, and then that buzzer goes off and they can't even finish the sentence that they were on. So if someone came forward and asked for the 5 minutes and needed it, I would certainly not have a problem with that.
And mine's with request, too.
Shame. Ms. Carson?
I definitely liked your idea. The only problem I have with it is I don't want to be accused of partiality, that this council played favoritisms towards one person when we didn't another.
Yeah.
So I like the idea, but I'm not going to support it only because of that fact, because I know that is going to happen.
Okay. Mr. Benson?
I think this is the policy that we already have. We have a 3-minute limit now, but we have voted when somebody asks for more time, or maybe when one of the council members on their own volition says, well, do you need more time? And the guy says, well, I need a minute or two more. We've had a chance to act on that. And so I think that's what we already have. I think it's appropriate. So I would support 3 minutes with exceptions to be voted on by the council, which is the policy that we have as a practical matter right now.
Okay. Mr. Marino?
3 minutes.
Mr. McEldown, did you have another comment? Okay. Next item, Mr. Gaylor. It plays out 3 minutes, but that at the request of a council member or the citizen, we could, not will, but we could extend it.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mayor, I think what we would do is make sure that that's written up in an agenda so they can see that, and then the mayor would then probably repeat
No
that.
partiality.
As part of the
Yeah.
general introduction of the issue.
Good.
Good.
Okay?
I got it.
Next item.
On H, there was a request to include personal attacks, whether directed toward members of the city council, city staff, or fellow citizens, including the speaker, are prohibited. That didn't seem
Does anybody have a
controversial.
challenge with that? I don't need to go down the list on that one, do I? Is everybody okay with that one? Yes, that's good.
Then the last item had to do with K, and this somewhat answers a question that was asked by, I think it was Councilmember Marino. When we're in a public hearing and you're making a record on that case, zoning case, as a good example, then none of these rules regarding the 3 minutes can apply, because what you're doing, if you cut off evidence, then the record could show that you are jeopardizing the presentation by not allowing that witness to present all the evidence. So when we're talking about quasi-judicial hearings, we're not talking about this 3-minute rule.
Okay.
Now, that does apply, though, not 3 minutes, but the limitation of testimony if the mayor or council sets the rule at the outset that we don't want to hear a duplication of testimony, and therefore we want you to appoint a spokesperson to represent this side and a spokesperson to represent this side. That's certainly appropriate, and that's beyond the scope of what we're doing here, because that's really on a case-by-case basis, depending on how many witnesses we have, and we'll have to deal with that, as we always have, when the issue comes up. So K only attempts to speak about the quasi-judicial proceeding in the context of if you're required to make a decision, then you aren't to consider any evidence or any discussion outside the process of that hearing. That's all the reason for K. That's it.
I don't see that being a challenge. Anybody on council have a challenge? That one seems pretty straightforward also.
Right.
That was good for explanation, but there was one more item.
Which one did I miss?
That council will only direct their questions or comments to the city attorney or the city manager. That they
Actually,
will not,
Mr. Mayor, that's in there.
Is that in there already?
Yes, it's at the last 3 lines of subparagraph D. It says, City Council shall refer questions raised during citizens' communication to the city manager or the city attorney for a timely response.
I'd almost like that to be, if there was some way to make that stronger, that say only.
It says shall refer.
My
Okay,
challenge
shall only?
is.
I can add only, shall only.
Well, my challenge is when we call out and say, you know, Ms. Morris, can you answer this question? And this is the first time she's heard it, and she's going to try to make an answer that maybe doesn't agree with something that the city may in fact do.
I can add only.
Does anybody have a challenge with that particular item? Mr. McElhenney?
No, I just had a comment once that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, sir.
I think the key that I don't see referenced in here is how we close the loop on the items that are raised. We get our handout, but there's no public closure of these items. And I have seen in some of the other cities that I've researched that at the top of the following meeting, there is a brief report from staff on items that were brought up by or during citizen communication if there was action requested. And I know we do that oftentimes at the end of a meeting, either in the update from the city manager's office or otherwise, but you often hear about people say, I brought something forward and I never heard anything back, or the citizen who was watching and isn't privy to the one-on-one communication that we know occurs. So it's just I guess an aspect to try and round out that process. And
That's a good idea.
Take a look
Flannery,
at
is there a way to do that?
The last sentence of paragraph D talks about appropriate follow-up will be provided by way of staff reports or agenda items.
Right, and I see that, but I guess my point is
bit?
just being very specific in the manner or the time in which that's going to come back so that it's an actionable item. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
This to me says staff's going to follow up with the citizen.
Okay. Mr. Bullock, you want to help with that?
I have a great suggestion. Jerry, you're going to hate it, but you're going to love it also. At the end of citizens' communication, any items that we have received back on action items, you read that this was a citizens' communication from this, but keep it right in line with citizens' communication and close that loop in reading back the ones that have been taken care of, or even one of the deputy city managers. So actually that the people that don't make it through the whole meeting, in case we have, yes, one of those, they hear about it at the beginning of the meeting, and we actually, he's absolutely right. I've had a lot of people say, well, what was finally done with this? And it's something we know about, but nobody else ever hears about it. So to me, that brings it all to a great close.
Mr. Mayor and Council, we can put it in the policy, but your direction to me is good enough. I mean, we can come back and, I can meet with my communications professional and think of some ideas of, whether it's through posting on the web and also coming back to you in the form that you just mentioned.
That's a great idea. Does that work for both of you?
Yeah, I'm open to having them come back. I just want to make sure that we have an explicit readback required. I know you're going to do what we say, but I think it's important to memorialize
It's
it.
in there.
If we're going to put this together, let's put it together. And
Yep.
so I'm open to, I guess my point there is, if we agree that we're okay clarifying that in the document, that I'm okay with staff coming back with suggestions on how they deliver.
Mr. Gaylor, does that work? Just something in there that says responses or whatever from citizen communication will be handled by the city manager's office at the end of future
At the next, the upcoming citizen communication window.
At when?
I would think that what I've seen and what I think makes sense is at the next citizen communication window, so the next meeting that has a citizen communication element, staff provides an update on action that came from the prior citizen communication window.
And if he needs more time for
And that may be it, right? It may be a
update.
3-word update that says, this item is ongoing, dialogue with citizen so-and-so is ongoing. And I think it just, to me, it's part of evidencing the dialogue that we know is happening every day with staff that many of our citizens don't get a window into.
Do you want that during citizen communications or during his report?
I think Mr. Bullock's comment on having that be the closure item of the citizen communication agenda item, if that's okay with council.
Yeah. I think that's, anybody have a challenge? It just says upcoming citizen communication. So, you may not be able to get an answer in a week, but at least we're going to know you're still working on it.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I would really encourage us to not try to craft it completely tonight, because this is a much more complicated, because, our list of council-directed items is pretty long, even though we do address them. Some items do take longer than others. So, there's a constant treadmill of items being generated and addressed. So, I think it may not serve your purpose to have me or one of the deputies reading a list of 10, 15 minutes long.
Yeah, but I think, again, I'm not trying to overcomplicate it. If we have on average 2 or 3 people on a given night that have a citizen communication item, many of those items are addressed in real time. Let's just look at it this way. A portion of those will be addressed in real time because somebody has the answer. A portion of those will require some offline discussion with the citizen or staff to go do some research. And I'm only asking about the items that are specifically raised in citizen communication, that there be a closed loop in a subsequent citizen communication window. And that may be that it's an ongoing or it's going to take a different form. But I think it's just showing each meeting, here is input coming in from citizens, here is update coming back from staff, and every meeting it evidences that cycle. All those other items that we get in our update that are true council action items, I think can continue to come in that form. I'm not looking to get everything. And this is me speaking, so
Good. Yeah, I go along with that. Mr. Gaylor, we're not looking for you to do this tonight. Then you'll bring back another one of these, I don't know, next week or whenever, that says, this is what we've got last, and then we can look at that.
Right. And one of the things I would mention to the council is that once you do implement this, there's a time frame. You could give yourself 3 months, see how it's working, come back, we'll do a check-in. Is there anything you want to tweak, type thing.
Ms. Bauer, you had a comment?
I just wanted to point out that what Mr. McEldowney is referencing or is talking about might spill into more of another council policy, which is your council norms and standards of conduct, which outlines how the agenda is laid out and what items are on the agenda. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that might be going beyond the scope of citizen communication and falling into some other council policies, and that if those are incorporated, we might need to look at, or City Attorney Gaylor might need to look at those other places where we have captured citizen communication.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good. Mr. Gaylor, you're okay? Mr. Flannery, you're okay? Council's okay? Ms. Carson, did you have a comment?
There was only one more thing and I was debating whether to even bring it up or not. Paragraph F, down at the bottom, where it says such questions and answers shall not be timed. but the mayor. Maybe in bold print, we should put the mayor or other council member chairing the meeting. Because I do believe that a lot of these things, the chair has the right and the ability to act upon items we're talking in timely manner, misbehaviors, whatever. So maybe it will give a better understanding to those of us sitting here, the newly elected people, if it is in bold.
Okay. Anybody have a challenge with that? Seeing none, Mr. Gaylor, you? Good, terrific. Okay, we are done on that. We are moving to administrative council business. This is not reports. This is where you are asking for some action from council. Ms. Teeter.
Yes, I have been a part of council that's passed hundreds and hundreds of ordinances, so I don't know which ordinance this is. I think I have brought it up one other time. But at one point, when there was going to be amplified music in a large crowd, council made that decision. Somehow, and tell me if I'm wrong, some staff members now grant that special permit. Is that the case? Because I would like this brought forward, and not just a picnic or a graduation party in a backyard that's having the amplified music, but if it's going to be a large gathering of, shopping center or something with many, many people in attendance and it's impacting the neighbors, I would like that to be brought in front of council to vote on that permit or not. Would that be a possibility?
Yes, it would be, but let me defer to Mr. McBroom, who has specific knowledge of that section of the code.
Good evening again, Mayor and members of council. City Council did have a study session discussion on this topic several months ago, and the issue was, should the ordinance be amended to require City Council approval for special events, or what we call organized event permits that include amplified sound. At that time, Council decided not to do that, but what we did do is include a process in the Land Development Code that if an organized event meets certain standards, the applicant is required to notify the adjoining neighborhood. It was staff's feeling at the time that if neighbors were aware of events that were occurring, that would eliminate complaints a majority of the time. But what we can do is resurrect that discussion, present it back to you, share with you how the Land Development Code was amended. I am aware of some recent concerns from residents about events that include amplified music, but I would not want us to overreact to those and overregulate organized events.
Okay, thank you, sir.
So is that okay with council that we bring that up? Okay. Ms. Carson?
One is a question. October 10th is the observed day for Columbus Day, and I do know the banks and the post offices are closed, but are we holding council? It says we are.
Mr. Flannery? That was a question I had raised the other day also.
We do not celebrate Columbus Day.
We don't hold it as a holiday.
Hold it as a sorry.
Thank you very much.
It's not an official holiday for the city, so that's why it's scheduled as a meeting.
Okay. And on this handout that we have up here from the city manager's office, you have attached the back page as the CDOT construction update. Is there some way on our website easily that it's always there where there's road construction? I myself tonight come out of Peoria to make a left onto 104th to see that I thought maybe I was going to be really late to council. So is there some way that if citizens are interested in looking up where we have road construction and it's easy, there's a little blinking light or something on there that says road construction update? Or
Yes, and I think Ms. Halstead would probably testify to this, that we are constantly looking at ways of improving the website, and that's certainly one aspect.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just to play off of that, I came westbound on 104th. The entire curb lane is blocked but they're doing work on the eastbound lanes at the curb. It didn't make any sense. I'm not quite sure what was going on. Mr. Benson.
That was one of the questions that I had, was what was going on 104th, because it's been cut down to one lane.
I believe most of that is the, and I may not use the right term, concrete flat work. Oh, we don't have Greg. It's the warranty work on 104th. So there's a lot of, if you notice when you drive down, there's a lot of patching going on. So that's part of that warranty system.
What has caused the problems?
It could be the heat. It could be, just the settling of the road in certain spots. We've had that. We did have a problem this summer with a significant fracture in 104th. If you recall, I think it was over 100 degrees that day.
Yeah, it was right around. It's just east of Landmark in the
correct
westbound lane. I remember.
Right.
Right. Okay. I also had a question about every time I come down Highway 2 and I want to get over to the Parkway Shopping Center or the King Supers, you have to go make a U-turn at 60th Avenue. I mean, how it ever got designed that way, I do not know. But you can't turn into the King Supers readily to get over to either that little shopping center or the Parkway Shopping Center. Could we just look into what it might cost to having some way to make a left-hand turn? Because it sure would help, I think, the businesses that are in there, and it would make give the people up north a much easier way to get to those shopping areas rather than having to go down and wait at a light at 60th and then make a U-turn.
It's a good point. That plaza is difficult to get in and out of. We have this CDOT jurisdiction. That intersection is probably one of the worst in Colorado for accidents.
There's no doubt that intersection is the worst.
So leading up to that there may be complications leading up to it. I know that with the dog track planning, a lot of improvements to circulation is one of the main goals that we're getting feedback on, as well as what our own internal feedback is to make sure that there's better circulation in that area.
Yeah, if you were able to make a left-hand turn on 64th and come straight south as opposed to going all the way down to Holly and then going around, that would solve the problem.
Right,
too,
I think that problem's going to be solved
Good.
with the city.
Okay, good. I'm glad to hear that that'll be one of the results, and that's good.
Okay. Mr. Flannery, do you have anything on the long-range financial plan for tonight?
No, sir.
Okay. Then we're going to go to reports. Mr. Bullock?
Okay.
Wait, Mr. Bullock? I know I only have 5 meetings left, but could you wait 1 minute? Mr. Flannery, would you please give your report?
I promise it's short, and actually, Mr. Bullock might appreciate this. We're going to probably this week, maybe next, but most likely this week, have a showcase in the foyer from the Historic Society. And it's a real positive, I think, partnership on that front. And that's all I had.
Good. Mr. Gaylor?
Nothing, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bullock, sorry to have interrupted you, but, I never got that part right.
Okay. Last week, the 15th through the 18th, I was in Minneapolis, Minnesota for the National League of Cities Leadership Training Institute's annual Leadership Summit. And the name of the summit was Inspire, Change, Lead. And I never go to these summits anymore with really great expectations because I don't like to be disappointed. But this conference started out with a bang, and it just got better and better as every speaker came along and spoke. The first speaker we had, and I don't want to spend a lot of time, but I want you to hear about some of these people that spoke, was our agenda facilitator was Lindsay Strand. And she just tied all the different sessions together and kept us in focus on what was going on and how each one tied into the next one. Our first speaker was Dan Buettner, And Dan Buettner is known for the blue zones. And the blue zones are 4 or 5 regions throughout the world where people live to be over 100 years old as a community. And they've gotten grants from National Geographic and different places to figure out why this happens. There are regions all over the world, and then there's one in Loma Linda, California. And the one in Loma Linda, California is, everything relates back to community. Everybody looks out for everybody, and nobody is left behind. So if I went to the rec center today and Mr. Zeiler wasn't there would be 4 or 5 of us going over to find out why he isn't there, because he shows up every day. And everybody is concerned about everybody. But there's one in Costa Rica, there's one in Japan, there's one in Italy. It's just, and they all relate back to a sense of community, whether it's a religious community, whether it's just a social community or whatever. And none of them relate to each other. Like in Italy, all the people drink. In Loma Linda, nobody drinks or smokes. In Costa Rica, it's basically, they live off of fruit and their lifestyle is kind of primitive. In Japan, it is strictly like social, everybody knows everybody, and the average age is around about, they say, 97. The oldest is 112. The youngest, I think, in this group is around about 89. And they're still doing everything that we do now and have no problems with it. And one of the things that we always take away from our seniors, the first thing is the ability to drive, because they forget what the brake is and they forget what the gas is and they go through the 7-Eleven. Okay, next speaker was John Bryson, and him and his wife, Barbara Crosby. They're both professors at the University of Minnesota, and they were teaching leading innovations and what is going to be the future. And everything pointed towards the future as far as living, strategic planning, everything. And the last speaker, he blew the house apart. His name was John Lutney. And John Lutney, he must know I'm from Commerce City, because he says where we're going to live is in the future. And he says, if you don't know this, you better start planning, thinking, caring about the future. Because the past is a library, the present is a reference card, and the future is a vision. And we're all little bricklayers to the vision, and you better get up on your tiptoes and start looking towards what you want to do and what you want to see and how you want to see your city framed, because if you don't, you're going to be living in the library. And everybody's going to just go right by. And he had one great remark that I'm going to find here, and then I'm going to shut up. Ask why. Don't be afraid to talk. Anything that comes before you, always start with why and work yourself backwards. Because if you ask why and they can't give you a reason for it, then it doesn't need to be done. And the greatest thing he said was, goals and objectives cost nothing, but strategies and planning costs everything. And that doesn't necessarily mean money. It can be your reputation, it can be your legacy, it can be anything. But you can have all the goals and objectives you want, and they won't cost you a dime. But the minute you start putting them into planning and strategies, it costs money. So think about it anytime you are going from here forward. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McEldowney.
I have a really concise version of that last statement, and it goes something like this: failing to plan is planning to fail.
Okay.
Briefly, we had the Dr.Cog MVIC about 2 weeks ago. That matter actually came before council tonight in the form of the resolution of support for Dr.Cog. I can't think of anything else offhand, so I will defer.
Okay. Mr. Diaz?
No reports, and I apologize that I missed a lot of meetings and events the first week of September. I was at good old State College, Pennsylvania, over at Penn State University. My employers sent me over there for an executive management training, so I was doing homework till about 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the morning, so thus I wasn't really rested. However, I was disappointed because I know we had a few events and meetings going on that week.
Ms. Teeter?
Yes, I have a few things. I was fortunate enough to attend the Pam Downs Lilac Awards Breakfast for Businesses of the Year, and the mayor and I got to speak, and it's just incredible. You do such a good job, Brittany, you and your staff. It was very well attended. Even Cronky Sports was sitting next to us, so that was good. Secondly, it was a couple weeks ago, the E470 ED breakfast, and Brittany gave a presentation there, which you did a great job as well. And I attended Al Fry, who owns Fry Sand and Gravel, his funeral, which there had been 600 people there, and he employs many Commerce City residents. And lastly, I want to give my condolences to the family of Bobby Krall. I knew her since I was in grade school. Her sons and I went to school together, and she will be greatly missed by so many. And I'll try to get back from the mountains that morning. I'll be leaving to try to get back by 1 to be at her memorial service. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Carson?
No report.
Mr. Benson?
Yes, thank you. The last week and a half, I was out of the country at the International Bridge, Tunnel, and Turnpike Association conference. We talk a lot about sustainability, I guess, in almost everything that we do. And in the context of transportation, it's how can we develop a plan to finance roads and transportation that's going to work for the foreseeable future. And I guess one of those things, just one of them, is probably a precursor of the total vehicle miles traveled program as opposed to the gasoline tax, because in several countries in Europe and in some states, I think particularly Oregon, they have started using this on commercial vehicles, where when you go into a state, they start tracking you and charging you by the mile for the miles that you drive in the state. A statistic that I heard from several people was that trucks do between 1,000 and 10,000 times the damage to your roads that cars do, the trucks do. So that's why they're imposing, in effect, a toll on commercial vehicles. There could be vehicles going through Colorado that fill up with gas in Wyoming, drive all the way through Colorado on I-25 and don't ever buy a gallon of gas. So we're not getting anything out of that. Yet they're doing 1,000 to 10,000 times more damage to our highways than the cars are. They're not paying their way, I don't think. And maybe this is going to be the way that we're going to be able to get some transportation money. But it works, it's a satellite-driven operation using a GPS-type onboard device inside the truck. And we rode around with some of that. They have about 50 enforcement vehicles, both in Berlin and in Prague, to catch people who don't have one of these devices. And they've got the right to shut them down, take their truck, whatever they need to do to get them to get an onboard device in their truck. But they collect the money, and they're having money to do their build up their road infrastructure. So I'm hoping that something like this is going to happen over here. Also, on September 13th, last Tuesday, we had my monthly Ward 2 meeting. Since I was out of town, I want to thank Ms. Carson and Mr. Marino for covering for me at that ward meeting. So thank you both for doing that. And coming up on September 22nd, we have an E470 meeting. And I guess, Mr. McBroom, are you going to be there? Are you going to be there? Yes. Okay. And I think Mr. Cordero is. This is where we're going to have the discussion about the off-ramp from South. Jerry will be there? And you'll be there too. Good. Okay. We're going to have a discussion about the off-ramp from southbound Tower onto westbound Pena, and about when that's going to get done. There seems to be some issue about how much that's going to cost, either $7 million or $11 million, depending on who you talk to, but I think those things are going to be straightened out at that point in time. E470 is responsible for building it. I don't know whether they're going to build it or whether they're going to give us the money and let us build it or hire a contractor to build it, but they understand that it's their responsibility, and I'm going to do everything I can as a representative of this city to get that done, because it's something that a lot of people talk to me about, that, boy, we really want that ramp off of southbound Tower onto westbound Pena. And I've been working on that for 2 years, and I think it's finally going to happen, because the trigger date is January the 1st, 2012. It's just a matter of getting it into the budget of E470, and that's one of the things we're going to be talking about this Thursday, when we're going to have a presentation by our staff. So that is all I have.
Mr. Marino?
No report.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes, just a few things. Last week, I was in Ridgeland, Mississippi for the Public Safety Crime Prevention Steering Committee for the National League of Cities. It was probably one of the best steering committee meetings that we've had yet. We spent days in that room together going over national policy and coming up with some really good things. I'm going to be coming forward here in the next few weeks with a presentation on that for council. Bless you, JD. I'll be coming forward with a presentation and a resolution to ask the council for us to support a resolution coming out of that. So there'll be more on what was going on there here in the next week or two when we can get it on the schedule. Attended the Historical Society meeting on Friday. The membership is growing and growing, so it's doing really well, and it's exciting to see. And just to remind everyone one more time about the 4th Annual Pioneer Picnic, which is at Veterans Park, and that is again Saturday the 24th, next Saturday from 1 until 4. And also, the Historical Society is going to be holding an estate and garage sale. That's going to be Thursday, October 6th, Friday the 7th, and Saturday, I think, a half a day on the 8th. So it's 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the afternoon, the 6th and 7th, and then 8 to noon on the 8th. And that's going to be at the Historical Society building, which is 7450 Highway 2. So there's a lot of information, and there's going to be a lot of really good things out there. I know that there's some of Bobby Krall's things out there that her son would really appreciate if people would come out and, take a look at. I know that he's been really working hard to try to get some things done with some items that are still left at the house. And so I just did want to also say that our thoughts and prayers and all the best wishes for the family. I mean, this is a really difficult time for them. I know that he is devastated, and Bobby's been a big part of all of our lives. As Kathy mentioned, we've all grown up with Bobby, and she was always a huge supporter of mine. And there were many times when I would just go by her house and sit down and just talk with her, and she always had some of the best advice. So she will be missed more than I can say. And the one last thing I had was, I almost forgot. One of the most exciting things that happened while I was out in Mississippi is that I was able to be on a conference call with President Obama, and that was a pretty exciting conference call. It was a great opportunity, and he was talking about the American Jobs Act, and it was a pretty exciting call. So that was probably the highlight of the whole trip. So thank you.
Okay. Just got a few things. Last week we had one more of the business owners meeting referenced the dog track, and they had a lot of good ideas. Also, we had executive board meeting for Metro Mayor's Caucus. But some of the more interesting things was Tuesday night we hosted the Mexican Consul General at the Rapids game and his staff, which was pretty exciting. We didn't do as well as we could have, but we did better than we expected. And then on Thursday night, they hosted us at a reception at Arvada Center. Arvada, I guess, has been working with the Mexican consulate pretty close. So that was very nice. Adams County Council of Governments was Friday being held in Broomfield, and it was the only meeting this time where we didn't have to listen to an RTD report. So that made it especially nice. As far as stuff that's coming up, we've invited the mayor from Kunming, China, to be over here, and he's actually accepted our invitation. He's going to be here Monday. And so there's a meeting, Sister Cities is where he's going to be. So right now I'm trying to get one of the other metro mayors on my committee to handle that, but if not, there's a chance that I may not be at next Monday's meeting. I've also been invited to go to Nanning in October, and as is the usual case, it will be at my dime, but I haven't quite made the decision there. I and myself and the mayor from San Antonio, Texas, will be the two speakers at a NLC webinar coming up in a week, speaking about foreign trade. I'll be speaking on the China-U.S. cooperative zone that we've been trying to put together through Metro Mayors. It has actually made some waves through the nation, which is really exciting. And it's funny, one of the people from Denver's EDC made the comment when he was talking to us. He says, "I never thought you guys would be able to pull this off." But we did. One of the other things, I met with some of the landowners up on 120th, and it was interesting because they're a little concerned because all of them are on the same aquifer that everybody else on 120th is on, and no one has had any problems except just one of the properties. So they all have ideas on what the problem may be at that place, but it seems that if everybody's pulling off the same aquifer, the chances that one particular bubble in that would be different is pretty slim. So, and they came to me wanting to meet because they were concerned that their area would lose value because of what's being shown out there. So I advised them that I would make sure that everybody gets gets some chance to talk about it. That's probably all I have. Mr. Marino, did you have something else?
Just one more item, Mr. Mayor. Wanted to wish Councilwoman Carson a happy birthday yesterday. If I'm not mistaken, she turned 40 years old, so. Happy
that
birthday.
Was 4 years old? You are so cold. Okay, if there be no further business come before this council, meeting is adjourned. Everybody drive safe. Mr. Flannery, I have a book that came to me that can be offered to our employees if they were so inclined.